From 2006 to 2008, I was a student at university in England, studying paramedic science. This course was a 2-year fast track into becoming a qualified paramedic. The course involved placements at various points throughout both years. First, we spent an evening or night in dispatchers. I'll never forget some of those calls, such as a man waking up in bed next to his wife who had died during the night. Next, we were stationed with the patient transport service, taking patients to their hospital appointments when they couldn't get there alone. Finally, after waiting a good 6 months for the opportunity, it was time to spend a prolonged placement with the 999 crews. You could choose a couple of preferred locations, and I was fortunate enough to be given the ambulance station close to my home, so I moved back into my parents' home that winter for a full term, leaving my university buddies behind. In hindsight, I wish that I hadn't, because it turned out to give me far less interesting experience. The station was in Buxton, Derbyshire. Google Map it. It's the middle of nowhere territory. It's also 45 minutes from the nearest hospital, so you better not get badly hurt while you're up there. Only people did, all the time. One evening, we respond to a call where a guy has come off his bike on the Cat and Fiddle Run. It's named after a pub by the same name on that road, which passes over the Pennines Mountains. Bikers love to bomb it up and down. It's notorious. The guy broke a brick wall with his body. Legs were over his shoulders. We took him with blue lights to the aforementioned hospital, but I don't think he survived. This is where things get messed up. We turn out of our hospital, travel maybe half a mile, and get flagged down by a pedestrian. She shouts through the window that somebody has been beaten badly. We later find out that this was the case of somebody bumping into somebody else in a bar, nothing more. At that exact moment, a guy in a red shirt stumbles out from a side street and collapses in the road. I had been in the rear passenger seat of the patient compartment, my mentor and her technician riding up front. They get out before me to help him, whilst I open the side bay. Stupidly, I climb out as my mentor helps him in. That's the point at which I notice two things. He isn't wearing a red shirt. He's topless and saturated head to waist in his own blood. And there's a mob of people heading straight at us. Maybe 10 or 15, I forget. I'm still outside the ambulance and pretty much frozen in terror. I'm only 19 at this point, and I'm pretty much a pussy. This was 2007. Thankfully, my mentor hauls me inside and locks the door instantly. She then turns to me, asks if the rear door is locked. It's not. They open it from the outside. My mentor pushes them back, and I couldn't believe it. Heckles them, telling them to pick on a group of people, not just one man. She then manages to close and lock the door. What happens next will stick with me forever, and clearly has as I'm telling this story nearly 10 years on. They begin to try and flip the ambulance. Meanwhile, another guy starts hammering on the side window, shatters it, and cuts himself wide open with blood everywhere, but keeps going. There were animals. There's a window between the rear and front cabin. We see a police car approaching. He doesn't stop, but continues straight past. Please give UK cops guns. I don't blame him for not stopping. Only later did I find out that the keys were still in the ignition, but nobody had attempted to enter the cabin through sheer luck. Anyway, after a while, a few of them peeled away out of boredom, I think. But in the end, the cop who drove past returned with help, and they all split. This part is a little hazy, possibly due to it being so long ago, or maybe I only remember the scary bits in more detail. My mentor had actually called the police for help. The car who passed was supposed to help us, but literally just drove past due to a lack of backup. I'm sure had our police carried guns, he could and would have probably helped. Sadly, our police can't do much in situations like this if outnumbered. We had a 45-minute drive back to the station after this, in pitch-black country roads, but it passes my parents' village and I was let off shift early, and they dropped me off. So this story happened back when I was in 5th grade in 2005, when I lived in western Montana. My bedroom was shared with my 2nd grade sister, and we had a king-size bed that we shared. To describe my house a little, our room was facing the backyard but was a basement room. Basically, standing up looking out the window into my room, I was eye level with the ground outside. Up and to the left above my window, I could see onto our deck which looked into our upstairs kitchen. Kind of confusing, but bear with me. Anyways, this particular night, my sister and I were having a sleepover, and our friend was in the bed with us. When we were falling asleep around 1 a.m., our friend woke us up to show us that a deer was on our deck. We looked out and we saw a deer on the deck. This was normal in Montana, so we laid back down. I guess my friend stayed up staring at it, and she woke us up about 5 minutes later, saying she thought it was actually a person. Right then, we looked, and we saw the shadow move a little. It was clearly a tall person's silhouette. We started freaking out, and then we saw 2 green laser lights. They were just 2 small pinpoint lights that were coming from the guy's head area. We thought it was binoculars, but at this point we were on high alert. Our eyes had adjusted a little, and we saw it was clearly a guy looking into our kitchen window. I was too scared to go tell my parents all the way upstairs, and past the view of the guy looking through the window, so we used my friend's cell phone and called the home phone. None of us owned cells at the time. It rang loudly, and we watched the guy run at full speed off the deck. As soon as he ran away, the 3 of us ran screaming upstairs and told my dad. He called the cops and they searched the streets, but never found the guy. Now here's where things get a little weird. So just 2 weeks earlier, the town's police station sent around notices in our neighborhood, telling us that a person of interest and dangerous sexual predator who had a warrant for his arrest had been spotted in our area. A tip had said he was staying with a family member 3 streets down from us. I remember this because I remember my mom, who's a bit paranoid, drove us by the address of the house on the notice one time, and made us very aware that this was going on. They said that they wouldn't let us ride our bikes outside during this time. I remember looking at the house every time we drove by. Turns out, maybe 2 or 3 months later, this same man was apprehended for the kidnappings and abuse and murders of 2 children, and killing their family in Idaho, only 2 hours away from my house. In some of his interrogations, he confessed to stalking the kids by watching their homes at night. With what? You guessed it, night vision goggles. The same green lights we saw that night. I also one time found some obscure website that had some of his writings, where he discussed living in Montana at various times, and discussed that right before killing this family, he was searching for children to kidnap. We were the same ages as the kids he would abduct. I have no proof that he was the person looking in our window, but the evidence all adds up for me, down to the timeline and area I lived at the time. I won't go into the whole detail of his crimes since they're all over the news and you can read all about them in the links below. I researched this guy in depth, and he was a sick motherfucker. He has alleged diaries of his crimes and filmed the tortures he committed, so I consider myself blessed. So I'm almost through all of my Let's Not Meet personal stories, but here's another that might be of interest. This happened in about 1994, when I was about 30. I'm a woman, by the way. I had just rented and moved into a very small but very cute house in Sacramento, California. I was very excited because my best friend Lanny lived right around the corner, so we had many grand hangout plans. For those familiar, it was a neighborhood bordering between Tahoe Park, a nicer older neighborhood, and not far from South Sacramento. So on the edge of sketchy because South Sac is a rough area with lots of gang violence. This is relevant. Let me set up the layout so that you understand the various perspectives, because this layout is pretty important to the story. When I stepped out the front door, standing on the front porch, I would be facing the street. To my right is one front-facing window, and then the corner of the house beyond which was a small patio and detached garage. Looking to my left, there are two front-facing windows with views into the living room. There's a small paved walkway between that, the front wall of the house, and a large flower bed with two very big camellia bushes. Follow that walkway between the two front windows, and you come to the front corner of the house. Step left around to that side of the house, and there's another window, and that window looks directly through the length of the living room and all the way to the other side of the house. Wall-to-wall view. The landlord, a man, who lived there prior to me moving in, already had these pretty blue floral material curtains on the windows. Not drapes, but simply material with no backing on those cheap little curtain rods that you put inside the window frame walls and are held up by tension. Very pretty, but not very private. Okay, so I had been there less than a week and invited Lonnie over on a Saturday night to drink some beer and smoke some weed. When Saturday Night Live was over, she headed home. I closed the door after I saw her pulling out of the driveway, but stepped right back out again to call for my cat. It was absolutely dead quiet. I mean, not a car. Still and very quiet. Like 1 in the morning. So I'm whisper calling my cat as to not make too much noise in the quiet night. I'm looking to my right towards the garage and patio area, because he would usually come out from that direction, still whisper calling. No cat. So just as I turned my head to the left to start whisper calling in that direction, I saw a man do this crab step side jump from the side corner of the house to then hide behind the large camellia bushes. Fuck me running, are you kidding me? I don't know for how long, but he had clearly been peeping on me and Lonnie, and remained there after she left, so he knew I was alone. In the instant that I saw him, I could tell he was wearing a fanny pack. I know some people still wear them today, but they were already out of fashion by that time, and my first thought was that it was a rape kit. Now I'm a tall woman with a naturally deep voice, and that sent a wave of terror through my body, and I immediately started shaking. But I was not having this. He was not going to think that he'd outwitted me, or that I was afraid of this son of a bitch. This is not my first rodeo. I was still at my front door, and knew I could instantly get in and lock it if I had to. So I drew myself up, and took a deep breath, dropped my already deep voice lower, and shouted as loud as I could, "What are you doing over there?" My voice just boomed through the dead quiet night like a shockwave. I heard little critters in the shrubs skittering away, and I must have sounded like some enraged roid rage she-man. At least I hope I did, because I intended to. And you know what happened next? Instead of just taking off, he actually answered me. He shuffled a little and mumbled, I'm just looking for my cat. Come here, kitty, here, kitty," and made his way the fuck out of there. I must have surprised him and rattled him enough that the motherfucker felt he needed to give me an answer. That's right, bitch. I asked you a question. Having spent my courage, I jumped back into the house, called 911, and called Lonnie. She immediately came back over to stay with me until the police arrived. Only the police never did arrive. Remember that I lived on the fringe of gangland, South Sac? Yeah, well apparently Saturday nights are peak nights for gang warfare, drive-by shootings, and just violent drug fighting, gun shit, so my peeping asshole was not high on the priority list. Like nowhere close to being on police radar that night. So after an hour and another call to 911, we decided fuck it. We jumped in our truck and went riding around looking for the fucker, called the police again and told them what we were doing. Naturally, we were advised that this was not a good idea. We assured the operator we were not going to engage him, just find him. I understand the position that the police were in with the gang show going on down in South Sac. But I need a cop too, and one isn't coming, so we're taking back our control and we're going looking for the fucker. Never found him, and eventually went back to my place and she spent the night with me. We slept on the floor downstairs because we didn't want to be upstairs and not hear if someone tried to break in. At 4:30 that morning, we were scared awake by the police shining their light through the window. Scared the shit out of us for that moment before we realized it was the police. I answered the door and talked to them, but what the hell were they going to do now? The guy had been gone for hours, and it's not like he left his calling card outside the window where he was peeping. I didn't stay there Saturday night, but I bought and installed mini blinds on all the windows. On Monday, a friend of mine came over and, with the landlord's blessing, installed motion-activated security lights outside to eliminate all dark corners of the exterior of the house. From that point forward, you couldn't even get close to the house without being flooded in light, and there was nowhere to hide. What is up, guys? Blue Spooky here, as always. I just wanted to thank you guys so much for watching, especially if you made it this far to the end of the video. If you guys enjoyed the video, please feel free to leave feedback in the comments below, or perhaps like, share, or subscribe if you feel so inclined. As an update before anything else, I'm going to start working on the next Q&A for this month pretty soon. So if you guys have any questions for me, please feel free to leave them in the comments below on this video right here. If you guys have any themes you'd like me to read, or any personal stories that you'd like to share, go ahead and take a look in the description of the video below. There will be links to all of my social media accounts, including my Facebook, Twitter, and Gmail. Go ahead and send me a message on any of those, and I'll try to respond to your message and include your story in a video as soon as possible. If you do decide to send in a story, please feel free to include in the tagline what the name of the story is, what the theme is if it has any, and how you'd like to be credited in the description of the video the story appears in. If any of you are curious about the music used in this video, the music is always listed in the description below, in the order which it appears in the video. I list the tracks by name, and I also have links to the artists in case you like their work and you'd like to check out more of it. So if you're curious about the music, go ahead and check in the description below. Last but not least, of course, if you guys have any constructive criticism, please feel free to leave it in the comments below, as I'm always looking for new ways to improve the channel. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I hope you guys have a great day.